Thank you, Senator, and thank you all very much for the privilege and opportunity to be here. Corelli, thank you very much for opening up your home of sorts. And Chris, honored to finally be here with you. And to the mayor, I'll brag on Mayor Schaaf in a moment. It's a pleasure to be back with you here. And of course, with our two chairs, respective budget committees in the Senate and the Assembly, I want to just acknowledge and thank Assemblymember Ting and Senator Skinner for their incredible leadership, stewardship, support over the course of the last number of years, but more importantly, over the course of the last number of months, as this state has been very deliberative, very intentional in moving very focused way to address some of the most systemic and challenging issues in this state, not waiting for traditional calendars to provide that direct relief and support across a spectrum of issues. That sense of urgency has been demonstrable. This partnership with the Assembly and the Senate has been second to none, and I'm incredibly grateful to both of you for your incredible leadership. I'm about to make an announcement no other governor in California history has ever made, and I would argue no governor in American history has ever made. Today, we're announcing a $75.7 billion budget surplus. I'll repeat that because only 3 people apparently heard it. This time last year, we announced a $54.3 billion projected shortfall. Today, we are announcing a projected $75.7 billion budget surplus. It's a remarkable turnaround. We talked about California coming back. I made the point at the State of the State a number of months ago, California is not coming back. California is going to come roaring back. $75.7 billion operating budget surplus. An additional $26 billion will be coming from the federal government. We are now in a position to roll out a $100+ billion comeback plan in the state of California. And the first announcement in that plan we're announcing today, and that's immediate relief to millions and millions of taxpayers, millions and millions of Californians. Today, we're announcing $12 billion tax rebate to the people of the state of California earning up to $75,000. Let me put that in perspective. That tax rebate will impact just shy of 80% of all tax filers will get a direct stimulus check, will get a direct relief payment because of this announcement. 2/3 of all Californians will benefit from this stimulus. That's roughly $12 billion, let me be specific, $11.9 billion when you add, as Senator Skinner said, to the stimulus, the round 1 stimulus that we put out a number of months ago. I want to make this clear, and I make this with respect that is due. This is a proposal from the administration. It requires concurrence and support of the legislature, and that's why it's humbling and very meaningful to have the 2 budget chairs here today. I'm by no means naive about the deliberative process as we roll out not only today's announcement, but we roll out this May revise on Friday of the importance of that give and take with the legislature. But I'm mindful that our values are aligned, and that's been demonstrable over the course of the last number of months with the early action that we've taken. So $12 billion in direct tax rebate. That's the largest year-over-year tax rebate that's ever been provided in any state in American history. Number 2, we're very mindful that that stimulus alone of $600, $500 for families with children and those I-10 filers is not enough to address the stress, the anxiety over the course of the last year plus in this pandemic-induced recession. And that's why today we'll be announcing our desire, our plan to double the rental assistance in the state of California with the goal of getting 100% of all the back rent paid and provide 100% support over the next few months to renters that have been directly impacted by this pandemic. $5.2 billion we're putting up to take care of rent payments. In addition to the $5.2 billion, this builds on the $2.6 we announced a number of months ago, additional $2.6, $5.2 billion, in addition to paying off 100% of that rent going back to last April. and moving forward over the course of the next number of months. We're also mindful rent is just one part of the burden of households. Issues of gas, electricity, and water are real. So today we're announcing $2 billion of direct relief to pay down utility expenses, to pay off water, gas, and electricity needs. $1 billion of that $2 billion specifically we're proposing to be set aside to address the issue of water in this state. So this is not an insignificant announcement. It's unprecedented, as I say, in California history, but that's rhetoric, and that often gets lost. But direct stimulus checks going into people's pockets, that direct relief, that's meaningful. Direct renter relief at 100%, not the 80% is our proposal, and we would allow for that 100% to be retroactive to cover those that have already received the 80% assistance, and providing $2 billion for gas and electricity and for water, we think is a significant direct, not only stimulus, but direct relief to millions and millions of Californians in need. And this is just the first of many announcements this week across the spectrum that amplify the narrative of this state truly roaring back. I want to just close, make a few subsequent points to what the Senator was referring to a moment ago as well. This is all on the basis of the recovery that California is already experiencing. It's on the basis of the revenue that's coming in historic terms in the state of California. And that's because we are defeating and we are successfully applying strategies to address this pandemic. And as Senator Skinner rightfully said, our case rate and our positivity rate are among the lowest in the United States of America. In fact, today the 7-day rate came in at just 1.0%. That's the lowest 7-day case rate, or rather positivity rate, since the beginning of this pandemic. And put that in perspective. Some have suggested, well, we're not testing like we did. That's not necessarily the case. 223,000 tests came in yesterday, 1,337 individuals tested positive for COVID. Accordingly, the Senator was right, California continues to make progress on vaccinations. Just shy of 32.5 million doses have been administered to Californians. Just shy of 62% of all Californians have received at least one dose. Eligible Californians 16 and over. This week, we will request from the federal government 100% of the available supply that's been set aside for the state of California, 2,076,000 doses to be exact. And while there has been a decline in people that have looked to access the vaccine, it's not as precipitous as many other states, but we are mindful it's a decline nonetheless. And I reinforce this in closing before we open it up to questions to make this point. One has to do with the other. That California's economic success, our economic recovery, is predicated on ending this pandemic. And we need to be mindful that this disease is not didn't take Mother's Day off, and it's not taking the summer off. It's as deadly as it's ever been, and we are mindful that the mutations are as challenging as they've ever been. We are monitoring well over just shy of a dozen mutations in this state. And that's why it's important to remind each and every one of you the power and potency if we want to get our kids safely back into in-person instruction, to get our small businesses back up and operational, if we want this economic recovery to continue as robustly as it's began, we need to continue our vaccine program. We need to continue to be vigilant and mindful of social distancing until this disease is behind us once and for all. 275,000 jobs have been created in the last 2 months in the state. 1% of America's jobs came out of the state of California in February. California is not just back, California is roaring back, and I want to thank every member, this remarkable place we call home, every member of our extraordinary community, 40 million Californians strong, for everything you've endured, for your resilience, for your grit, for your determination, and for your commitment not only to yourselves and your loved ones, but the broader community, because everything we just announced is because of the people of the state of California, their hard work, and that's demonstrable in the announcement that we're making here today. So with that, we're here, of course, to take any questions.
Hey, Governor, Jeremy with Politico. Thanks for taking our questions. I'm going to do every other reporter's favorite thing and ask you a two-part question. So first piece is there's no shortage of proposals for Democrats in the legislature for ways to spend this windfall, everything from more coverage for undocumented immigrants to more wildfire preparedness. So why open with this proposal of direct payments? And then, as you well know, some statutory language having to do with distance learning is up for either renewal or expiration soon. Do you support continuing the allowance for distance learning next year, or do you think it's time to move on?
On June 30th at midnight, I anticipate that will lapse, and everybody should be back in the fall and in-person instruction safely. In fact, our budget will reflect even more support than the previous support that has been provided for health and safety, and I look forward to working closely and collaboratively with the legislature to advance those budget proposals as well. As I noted just a moment ago, this is one of a series of announcements we'll be making this week, and we're honored and pleased to be here in the backyard of the two budget chairs to make this important announcement of direct relief in this large tax rebate, the largest in U.S. history year over year, because we believe people are better suited than we are to make determinations for themselves of how best to use these dollars. And that's why we want to get money into people's pockets as quickly as possible, and we want folks to know that these resources are coming. Accordingly, we recognize the acuity of stress associated with back rent, and we recognize the acuity of stress as it relates to gas, water, and electric bills. And we think it's really important to send a powerful message today about the importance of being able to find relief and access these critical funds so we can keep people housed, we can keep people warm, safe, and make sure that they're getting the kind of resources that they deserve during this very challenging period of time. You'll be hearing other announcements today, later this afternoon, tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, and may revise will be formally presented for consideration in the legislature on Friday.
Hey, Governor, it's Ben Christopher from Cal Matters. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks to everyone for taking the time to do this. I'm going to copy Jeremy and do a two-parter. First, just
this is what is known in legal terms, collusion.
No comment on that. So the first round of stimulus checks, we saw a number of people, a large population of people who were eligible but maybe didn't receive that benefit. So I'm wondering what you learned from that process the first time around that you're going to incorporate into this one to make sure that as many people as possible who are eligible are getting that relief. And then the second question is just about the GAN limit. Is that what is guiding this allocation? Is this all coming out of the GAN limit requirement? And if so, is there any are you allowed to sort of target that the allocation, or does it have to be per capita equally?
Yeah, we talked about the GAN limit in January and the budget presentation. It's likely we'll hit the GAN limit for only the second time since 1979, and that will be determined over the course of the next year plus, what exact amount of dollars will be needed to set aside. 99.9% of you have no idea what the GAN limit is. Suffice it to say, it triggers when there's a windfall of revenue, a requirement that roughly half money that is stipulated in that requirement go to K through 12 education under our Prop 98 formula, and another half go back in some form of direct support to the taxpayers. This is above and beyond the statutory requirement. This is not the reason we're moving forward with this announcement. We're building on the announcement of a number of months ago and the segue to your question, the first part of your question is what did we learn? We learned that those just filing EITC, those earning up to $30,000, while that was important, it's also important to recognize that we needed to provide direct relief for people in the middle class, people earning up to $75,000, and that's why we're announcing and enhancing the available funds for those individuals. And again, that represents 78, almost 80% of all tax filers in the state of California. The middle class have been hurt hard by this pandemic. They've been squeezed across the spectrum. Working moms in particular, women notably, have been disproportionately impacted in this pandemic, and that's why we are building on what we did in January, providing additional $500 to support families with children. So the eligibility is now north of $1,100 or roughly $1,100, not just the $600 check. That's an additional $500. And we recognize the importance of continuing to make sure we're there for all Californians, because at the end of the day, one thing we know, it was referenced by the comments that were made earlier, is there was one group of residents in this state that did not dial home sick and weren't able to do as much distance work as others, and those were our essential workers, our frontline employees, many of them in mixed status families, many of them without documentation, and they were left out of the federal supports. They will not be left out of the support coming from the state.
Hi, Governor. Alexi Costa from the San Francisco Chronicle. I'm going to make this a trend and also ask a two-part question. The first would be, could you clarify, there's a lot of different pots of money. Could you clarify a little bit about what is going to be paying for these different proposals that you have announced today? And then the second would be that, you know, this is a kickoff for, it sounds like, a week of events that you're going to be doing to promote this budget that you don't plan to fully announce until Friday. Is this a campaign strategy as you're facing this recall election to get, you know, as much bang for your buck as possible, good publicity about, you know, these overflowing budget numbers?
I'm really proud of California's resilience. I'm incredibly proud of California's remarkable capacity not only to come back, but to come roaring back. I was also proud to now have had the opportunity, this is my third budget, to do what I did last year and do what I did the year before, and that's preview and highlight critical investments in the budget. This is something that I've looked forward to do, something we did in January, something we did last year in January and in the May revise and the year prior. And so that is an important part of a budget process. It's one of the reasons, and I was very proud and very grateful to review in detail the work that the Senate did and the Assembly did with their blueprint, and they previewed their priorities as well, and so many of them align remarkably well. And so that's why we're here. On the issue of the resources, it is true, $75.7 billion is general fund surplus. You have a portion of that will go to K through 14 education under Prop 98. A portion of that will be set aside under Prop 2 to pay down long-term obligations, unfunded health care, as well as pension obligations. We'll increase our rainy day reserve. That's about $11.2 billion, 26.6 under the Prop 98, 38.1. And if you're following me, I'm impressed, but 38.1 will be set aside for programs like those I just announced. There's an additional $26.6 billion. That's why it's over $100 billion comeback plan that comes from the federal government. Those have stipulated requirements, and those requirements include the inability to do what perhaps likely the inability to do what we just announced, and that's a direct tax rebate. This direct tax rebate does not come out, to your question, of the $26.6 billion federal stimulus. This direct tax rebate, the largest in U.S. history, not just California history, year over year, will come out of the operating reserve, or rather, excuse me, the operating surplus if approved by the legislature.
Hi, good morning, Governor. Melissa Colorado with NBC Bay Area News. Do you have a rough estimate as to how much money California tenants owe to their landlords during the pandemic? And my other question is, Will cities and counties be allowed to set their own eviction moratoriums? Will it change from county to county, city to city?
Yeah, so we have a statewide overlay, and we have language as it relates to the authority. That's due to expire in a number of months. We'll work with the legislature through a very deliberative process, similar to the two processes that we advanced prior to make any determinations on the basis of your question. As it relates to these broader issues, and forgive me, the first part of your question was specific to the rent. That issue, interestingly, there are a number of different studies that have come out with estimates. Some on the low end, well below the 2.6 billion, some on the high end, north of the 5.2 that we just put out. So the answer to the question is there is no readily reliable information that we can determine with some confidence what that universe looks like. And that's why we are increasing the total numbers available on the higher end, just to make sure we're covering the worst case scenario. And we believe roughly within margin that 5.2 should do it. That said, the take up on the first 2.6 billion has been a little slower than some had anticipated, which may preview that the universe may not indeed be as large as that high end number. So we just are in abundance of caution, making sure we cover a worst case scenario, but we'll be mindful in the deliberative process, working with the legislature to assess and make a determination over the course of the next number of weeks before this budget lands.
Good morning, Governor. Matt Boone with KCBS News Radio. Thanks for taking my question. Trying to get people back to work would also be aided by reducing the restrictions that have been imposed because of the pandemic. You set the target for June 15th for the dissolution of the tier system. Are we still on track for that? And if so, would it happen any earlier if things are looking pretty good?
Well, as long as we continue to keep this vaccination rate going, 333,000 people received a dose in the last reporting period over the last 24 hours, a little over 2 million in the last 7-day period. As I noted, that's down from where we were a number of weeks ago. So we're mindful that as long as the vaccination rate continues around pace we've seen, at least the minimum pace we've seen over the last week or so, then we're confident that June 15th number. We're also very pleased that we've seen case rates and positivity rates as low as they've been for a number of weeks, not just days, not just episodic, but a number of weeks. That stabilization is very encouraging. As you know well, San Francisco was the first Bay Area city that moved into yellow tiered status, the least restricted tier. The vast majority of counties are now out of the purple and red status in the orange and yellow status, which means in the least restrictive tiers. And we are looking forward in the next number of weeks to go beyond the blueprint, and we are confident we'll get it done at least by June 15th. That's it? Well, that was it. That's what happens when you have two-part questions. Let me just thank again, always a mayor, once a mayor, always a mayor. So thank the mayor, Mayor Schaaf, for all her incredible leadership and support and guidance as it relates to budget allocations. And trust me, she hasn't been shy about what she hopes to see in terms of investments here in Oakland, throughout the county. Again, it's humbling to be here with the two budget chairs who've been just incredible leaders. And we look forward to the give and take of the budget process. This week, we're rolling out our plan, building on the plans that they put out. And we look forward to sitting down, rolling up our sleeves, and working through the details with both of them and their staffs, and moreover, with the entire legislature over the next few weeks. But grateful opportunity to be here. Chris, great to be back with you, and notably great to be here at Unit Council. Thank you all.